Is Floyd Mayweather the greatest of all time? Well, I guess we'll have to discuss it. We bring in Robert Exel, the editor-in-chief of Boxing.com, and as you guys wanted, once again, Britton Harden. Britton, thank you for joining us. Robert, thank you for joining us, guys. We appreciate it. Now, Floyd Mayweather has basically said, guys, that he thinks that he hasn't said directly that he thinks he's the greatest of all time. He has indicated that Sugar Ray Robinson is up there. He has said that those guys have paved the way for him. So, Robert, we'll start with you, and then we'll get to Britton. Do you think that Floyd Mayweather is the greatest boxer of all time?
No, I think he's the greatest boxer of our time. I think that's sort of undisputed. But of all time, I'd have to say no to that question, Rick.
Okay, now would you say, Robert, and I could even open it up to you, would you say that because he dodged Manny Pacquiao, or they just dodged each other, if they wanted to make it happen, they would make it happen? Now, could you say that because he dodged Manny Pacquiao, didn't fight Costa Tszyu, were those the two big fights that may have cemented his legacy into being the greatest boxer of all time?
Absolutely not. And I think that when the question of the greatest boxer of all time or an era come up, I think that one or two fights isn't enough to refute someone's entire record. This man has 44 victories, 0 losses. He's been at the pinnacle of the sport for about 8 years now. Yeah. And he hasn't really ducked or dodged anyone. Now, contract disputes or disputes over money, whatever, what have you, those kind of things, it happens. It's sports. It happens in every sport, really.
Sure.
If you want to talk about basketball and certain people being traded to certain teams or whatever the case, but one or two fights can't refute the greatness that he has accomplished in the ring.
Okay, so let me open this up to both of you guys. I'm going to play devil's advocate, as I usually do on this show. If he were to fight Pacquiao, okay, I'm throwing out the hypotheticals because, of course, we'll never see it until they're 45 and broke. If he were to fight Manny Pacquiao, wouldn't you say this is the fight, not necessarily the century, because I know that Robert's going to throw some boxing historian-esque stuff on us with Jack Dempsey and all those great fighters. However, this would have been a cash cow for all of them. This would have been the biggest fight of our era. It would have generated the most amount of revenue ever in boxing. Shouldn't that be the case? Shouldn't it be, well, if he fought Pacquiao, and I know that so many people are going to get on me, but I don't really give a shit, that, you know what, if he fought Pacquiao and they were to duke it out and Mayweather won, wouldn't the argument shift a little bit? The pay-per-view numbers are in, the revenue numbers are in. He'd be 45-0. He would fight the guy that everyone wants to see him fight. I mean, what do you guys say to that?
Is revenue what determines greatness? We live in a time when all evidence seems to point to that fact. If you sell the most units of whatever it is that you happen to be selling, then you are the greatest, the latest, what have you. But revenue is not necessarily the determinant when it comes to boxing, especially when you take the long view. I mean, one has to take a look at one's competition, not just the record. I mean, he has a sterling record, he's unbeaten. I mean, all of that is a given. But if one looks at the competition that he fought, as well as the frequency with which he fought, it doesn't really compare to a lot of old school guys. And I'm not a nostalgist. I don't look to the past as being some sort of golden age. But I try to take a broad view, a wide angle view, rather than look at it through a telescope or a telescopic lens, but to take a broad view. The question about the greatest of all time incorporates all time. So again, the standards are different. The fighting technique was different. The revenue was radically different. So I think that one has to look at really the competition, who he fought, who he beat. And again, Mayweather's the best of the best. There's no question about it. And a fight with Pacquiao won't make any difference whatsoever.
See, now, you brought up an interesting point. You talked about the competition, and I guess I'll pose to you, Britton. Floyd Sr. said it shouldn't be Floyd's fault that he dominated the competition that he faced. He obviously beat Ricky Hatton at the prime of his career. He beat Miguel Cotto, who wasn't necessarily in the prime, but he was still better than the fight against Austin Trout. Whoever stepped up there, he beat. And Floyd Sr. said, you know what, it shouldn't be his fault that the competition was bad. So what do you say to that?
I think that, I just want to touch on one point. I don't think that the Pacquiao fight is out of reach. I think that it can still happen.
If he beats Brandon Rios.
if he beats Brandon Rios, which he should go and he should put on a boxing clinic if he decides to box and not brawl, I think Pacquiao wins that fight easily. That's my 2 cents on that, and I think that fight is not far out of reach. The argument that the Mayweathers make is that when Floyd gets in the ring with these A-plus fighters, people, they build them up. The media builds these fighters up to be the next person that could be the person to knock him off the throne every single time. Now, if it's for media purposes or not, this is what these people are built up. These boxers are built up, and they're world-class fighters. He hasn't fought anyone that wasn't a world champion in years. So they're world champions. That means something in the world of boxing. A certain respect goes with that. He's fighting world champions and he's making them look like B- fighters. It's completely not his fault that he is a step above. Robert, here's where I would have to disagree with you.
Okay, here we go.
Here's where I have to disagree with you. Now, if you want to talk about boxing skill and boxing style, he completely changed the format of boxing. He's the greatest defensive boxer of all time. And he put defense on the mind of all of these young up-and-coming fighters, which is why you struggle to see these all-out brawls that we really want to see. The brawls that we used to see it with Ali and Frazier. And he has these fighters thinking defense first, because what he goes into the ring thinking is, the less I get hit, the longer my career is gonna last, the longer I'm gonna stay at the pinnacle, and the longer I'm gonna make these fighters look like B- fighters. And I think that we can easily say that he's the greatest defensive fighter of all time. We have numbers and we have statistics that can prove that. What we don't have is, we don't have those matchups with him and Sugar Ray Robinson and him and Sugar Ray Leonard. Or
you could do that on Fight Night round 3, of course.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
but we don't know when you get those guys in the ring what those fights would ever look like. So I think it is unfair to say who is the greatest of all time. I think there is no such thing as the greatest of all time. It would be completely disrespectful for me to sit down with Robert and try and argue my case for Mayweather, the greatest boxer of my era, against the greatest boxer of his era. I wasn't around when Muhammad Ali was showcasing world-class boxing skill, but he saw it, you know? So we can go back and forth as boxing enthusiasts and try and have that argument, but it would be completely unfair as a boxing enthusiast myself to try and say that one fighter is better than the next if they haven't stepped in the ring.
Okay, so let's just take one thing away from that brilliant rant, by the way.
Sorry
Good job. No, I'm fucking with you. So would you say that Mayweather is the best defensive fighter, Robert, of his, not even his era? Did you say of all time?
I said of all time.
Of all time, would you agree with that?
No, not necessarily. I'll give you a couple of examples. Willie Pep comes to mind. Nicolo Loesch, Argentinian fighter, amazing defensive fighter. I mean, one couldn't put a hand on him, and he never clinched. I mean, just couldn't touch him. Incredible fighter. But again, it's the same sort of argument. I mean, whether he's the greatest of all time or the greatest defensive fighter of all time, we're still using the same equation. So we should if we drop the equation insofar as who is the greatest fighter of all time, we should drop the equation as to who is the greatest defensive fighter of all time, just to be consistent.
Unfortunately, we have to leave it at that. But let me tell you guys, this was awesome, and I think that we should do this more often whenever you guys are free. Yeah. This
Robert,
is fantastic.
I want your phone number. I'm calling you, bro.
Off the air. Off the air.
Exactly.